Hey there, internets. We're at arm length, a little different view. Right behind me here, right by the file cabinet, that is a bookcase. Came from my dad's family. I made off with it. I kind of took it over when I was a teenager, but I made off with it when I moved out of my parents' house. And it's got a little ding in it, but I believe it came from his maternal grandfather. Kind of neat. The chair there, my dad refinished it, gave it to me. I think he refinished it. The cushions need an update, but that's where that came from. Behind me here is cedar chest. Came from my aunt's house. I think it came from my dad's family's farm because my aunt got the contents of the house when my grandparents died. I brought it here because we need the storage. The lamp, I think my mom made off with that out of from what I'm told, from the lobby of an airline. When they remodeled it, they let her take the lamps because they were changing them out. Or at least I'm told they let her make it. She didn't ever strike me as the type to just steal it, even though I was small when she passed. This, my dad hated. He stripped supposedly 10 or 15 layers of whitewash and paint off it. He made the middle doors and he refinished it. When we brought it here, glass got broke. And one door got broken, so I have to tack it all back together to get new glass. But my aunt was quite concerned. My mom's sister was quite concerned about its disposition when my dad passed, and was happy that one of us had either my brother or I had it. And move it hating around. You can see some moving boxes and stuff. And we got right behind me here a blank space. There's gonna be a fish tank there. You'll all be getting to see that at times. The chair there, it don't matter because I just refinished that. That was a garage sale find. That table, my dad ribbed mahogany. My dad refinished that. One of the things he was more proud of. He decided I needed to have it. Kind of an interesting table, and I suspect quite old. I do have another channel that I just kind of put random crap on, and I was working on some projects, and for some reason got a whole lot of views at stripping off the old kitchen table, all the paint and rust off of it. And then we spin around here. Bookcase is something Melissa had. It's a IKEA type furniture. But the thing behind me is what I've been waiting on to have a actual name for this channel. And I'll explain that in this video because we're going to the real name. So we'll move on back here. This particular, rotate my hand. I've got some books up here that I'll keep for reference. This is storage underneath. It has a bunch of family history stuff that got moved because I had to clean all this out. Massive door. It's called a plantation desk. Don't know that it was ever on a plantation. It was my grandfather's before my dad's. He might have gotten it from his father-in-law, but that's another grandpa, and that works for the name of this channel. The egg scale, that's something that came from my mom, or my grandma, maternal grandmother. Apparently, when she was a small child, she had to go to her parents after school. That was still a thing then, but they didn't necessarily have daycare. Imagine that. Families taking care of each other. Still has its Montgomery Ward sticker on the bottom of it, in part. And my grandma had to weigh the eggs. For reference, one of our large double eggs, I stuck that in there one time, put all the weights on the end, it still wouldn't lift the egg. My brother called it a fat, lazy American egg. And this desk, of course, drops down. Postal desk is a little bit different, but there's a plantation desk. I had other plans for it, why I wanted it, but as we spin back around, I wanted it to keep myself organized. And so, I got eventually up in the corner here, if you see, go back, it says B. Hickox & Company, Cabinet and Chair Makers, Waukegan, Illinois. Probably they're out of business. But that's who made it. I'm suspecting quite old. But there eventually I'll stick a proper camera up in there. And you're probably wondering why on it's supposed to be a politics channel, I'm discussing all this. Well, politics is a reflection of your values. And I'm going to be working on stuff for this channel at this desk and making the videos at them. We're going to need the computer. And you get your values from your family and often from your religion. My dad's family is not particularly religious. My grandfather had it with it when a minister skipped town. Not worse than he didn't pay for the milk he owed my grandpa for. He took off with the big 5-gallon metal milk containers that were expensive and didn't even return them. For those that don't know, you used to have to turn those in, and then you got new ones filled with fresh milk. And then I got a couple books up here. I got a copy of the Federalist Paper, a Bible. I'm going to have a Concordix. I'm going to have some other stuff I reference. Sorry for those that don't like it. Tough. There's going to be some old D&D books up there. I might even put the one first edition book I have just up there to say I've got it up there. There'll be probably some martial arts books too. But the ones I figure I might need to reference at times. I got all these cubbies and whatnot, drawers, but, this is where I'm doing this from. And your values come from your family as well, not just your religion. Politics, I had a friend, we were talking about people and relationships when I was going through what I call the second breakup, even though it really wasn't. And she said, politics is almost more important than religion because it's about values. She was a Mormon. Her husband's Protestant Christian. They don't always agree, but their values are very, very close in that regard. And so they were able to make their marriage work and have kids. Friends with her and her son, one of her sons were at my wedding. I've worked with them in Republican politics for several years now. But it's about values, and my family's values influence me. My dad was definitely to the right. People talk about default Republican. That's my family. My grandparents asked my dad when I was young, did they like FDR when we were learning about why certain presidents were on the money? And he said, nope, he was very socialistic. They were poor farmers. When World War II started, the story is, to give you an idea of where the farm was at that point, the story my dad related is that my grandma was bent out of shape because they would not run a line for electricity into the house. They would only do it to the barn for milking cows. And eventually, the house got electricity, but the original farmhouse from that time period, it still doesn't have indoor plumbing. The other houses, yes, have indoor plumbing. But back then, that wasn't a thing. Gives you a perspective of where they were. A very proud man. Another story related to me by my aunt. She related the story that they had to pretty much nail his feet to the floor to get him to apply for Social Security that he paid into it all his life. He wasn't going to take those kind of benefits. He wasn't going to beg. He wouldn't let my dad and uncle, and granted, trick-or-treating was not the thing it is now in the 1940s. He wouldn't let them go trick-or-treating because that was too much like begging. So our values come from who we are. And these antiques that we just went through a little tour of, those are connections to the people we didn't get to know, but yet we still carry their values. We still have that in us. And sometimes the ideas are not that new. When I was going through this, I found a piece of paper. It was an old piece of humor from 1992. I think my dad showed it to me back then. But it reads, from November 6, 1992, to Mr. and Mrs. Bill Clinton supporter, La La Land, USA, and with some other little jokes like 666 Blind Men's Bluff Road. It says, Dear Clueless, we have the distinguished honor of being on the committee for the raising of $5 million for placing a statue of Bill Clinton in the Hall of Fame in Washington, D.C. This committee is in a quandary as to where to place the statue. It would not be wise to place it beside the statue of George Washington, who never told a lie, nor next to Jesse Jackson, who never told the truth, since Bill Clinton could never tell the difference. We finally decided to put it next to Christopher Columbus, the greatest Democrat of all. He left not knowing where he was going. He didn't know where he was when he got there. He returned not knowing where he had been, and did it all on borrowed money. This Mr. Clinton would understand. Over 5,000 years ago, Moses told the children of Israel, pick up your shovels, mount your asses and camels, and I will lead you to the promised land. Roosevelt said, lay down your shovels, sit on your asses, light up a camel. This is the promised land. Now Bill Clinton is going to steal your shovel, kick your ass, raise the taxes on your camels, and mortgage the promised land. And he did raise taxes on the camels, thinking kids would not want to smoke if it was expensive, and every parent laughed at them. If you are one of the fortunate ones who have anything left after paying taxes, we expect a generous contribution for a worthwhile project. Respectfully, Bill Clinton Statue Committee. P.S. It said Bill Clinton is considering changing the Democratic emblem from a donkey to a condom because it stands for inflation, protecting a bunch of pricks, halts production, and gives a false sense of security while being screwed. Now, that's old. While cleaning this out, I found another thing, probably written by my mother, a piece of carbon paper, and I held it up to the light to see what it says. I was curious. I found some interesting things in there. I don't know why my dad held on to it. It was right next to a copy showing what her headstone would look like. And it was almost that exact same thing, but to bust on JFK in about 1970, which is probably kind of on the late side, which means she was probably copying it from somewhere else. I've seen pieces of that, the part about Moses, show up on social media about President Obama. I've seen other pieces of that appear elsewhere. These ideas are not new. Our values are not new. They come from where we came from. And the Constitution is our highest law. It's not a guide. It's not a set of advice or some good ideas. It's our highest law, and you have a consistent reading of the highest law. You have to understand where you came from and what was going on before. To understand the progress our nation has made, you have to understand where you were before. And that's what, for me, all of this is. That's what this desk is, in part. And so, why was I waiting for this desk for a real channel name? Because it is the channel name. This is from my grandfather's desk. So welcome to From My Grandfather's Desk with Pat Mackin. That is the name from this channel. And since my big commitment is to make sure I'm saying what's right. I may not be a Trump fan, but when he was right, I'd say it. 3 Supreme Court justices. As far as their ideologies, I'm good with that. But I don't have to like the guy to say when he's right. And Republicans don't need hyperbole and to make stuff up to make Democrats look wrong, because they're usually wrong. Conservatives are right 90% of the time. My grandparents, being poor, understood the dangers of socialism. Yet now we have people that, for some brain-dead reason, think they need to dig it up again. And so I will, just like always, have in the description below the links that support my positions. Because I'm not going to say, you're wrong, nah. It's going to be, you're wrong if you're a liberal. You're wrong, and here's why you're wrong. If I'm saying a conservative is wrong, it's probably because they're using hyperbole or going off the rails. And so you can expect that as well. But I will support what I put out there. Whether it's busting on education and coughing up links up the wazoo, or the video I've done in the proto version of this channel as I was dealing with other stuff like my house being flooded out and being repaired, and when I dug into the baby formula shortage, or last Saturday night's rant. This is actually the second attempt because the first one got a little on the long side and it wouldn't upload. But last Saturday night rant, I brought up about energy issues here in Washington State. And this one is going to kind of get brought up. I can't leave you without something useful to say, besides why this channel has the name it does. But as an example, we're going to talk about H.R. 1808 here, real briefly. Who's sponsoring it? Roundabout every Democrat in the House of Representatives. There's a few that didn't sponsor or co-sponsor, but there's a nice long list of sponsors that goes not just from the first page, but clear down onto the second page. It's something like 211 sponsors is the last count I heard. And it gives a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm not going to go through everything. Apparently, among their definition of assault rifles, any kind of folding stock, as though the only reason to have that is to make it more concealable and not storable or adjustable to your needs. But they always have this obsession with the grenade launcher. So apparently, it's mentioned multiple times that I don't know anybody who gets a grenade launcher. I believe it's an NFA item. The grenade certainly is. And threaded barrels. And most people who get flash suppressors get pinned barrels. So I don't know the point other than to prevent suppressors. And those don't make them that quiet, as most of us know. And then it gets into the usual no more than 10 rounds, accepting tube-fed 22s. Gets into the shotguns and says a second pistol grip. Barrel shroud stabilizing brace. Oh, that's for pistols. Excuse me. Barrel shrouds, which aren't common, but some of their descriptions of a barrel shroud can cover a lot of stuff. The way they define it, some of the Remington semi-automatic rifles and shotguns, where you have wooden stock on the fore end, wooden stock on the back end, and metal in between. If they're not specifically exempt, those actually could qualify as, or a rifle in that pattern could qualify as an assault rifle. The way they define this. If your stock goes all the way along the length of your rifle, it's not a barrel shroud. And then it gets into shotgun and a forward grip, pistol grip, or bird's head grip. If it has a fixed magazine in excess of 5 rounds, so if you got one that takes, say, 8, because you bought maybe one specific for home defense, you now have an assault rifle if it's semi-automatic. And again, a grenade launcher. Apparently those must be just everywhere. Revolving cylinders. Then it lists off for several pages all of the specifically banned weapons. We've got about 5 pages. Now, and then it gets into falling pistols, and we got a good 3 pages here of specifically listed 4 pages, or 3.5 pages of shotguns and pistols, and then any combination of parts. And it gets into some storage requirements, which it doesn't say how that's enforced or what the penalty might be if you live with somebody where it's a prohibited person and they could get at that weapon. And then of course they go after belt-fed weapons. And there's nothing I can find in here about inherited weapons, which means as far as when you can transfer them. It doesn't say include function of law. When my dad and my aunt died, function of law. It automatically should be transferred. It doesn't say it can be transferred by inheritance. There's no mention of it. Now, and that's something that's not being talked a lot about, is there's no mention of that. And then you got about 100 pages of lists of specifically exempt weapons, like the Remington 760, this one is the 740 and the 7400, or the semi-automatic twin to the Remington 870 and 7600. Specifically exempt for now, because we have to ask how long until someone does commit some serious crimes with that weapon and they have to specifically ban it. Interestingly enough, because of the way they describe it, they specifically exempt an SKS without offending features as long as it's got a fixed magazine. If you have a detachable magazine, it's a specifically banned item. So apparently I could put the fixed magazine back into an SKS and sell that SKS as long as I don't have and I'm not sure, I don't see anything in here about muzzle brake, but that's the kind of stuff you see in here. And kind of one of the next projects coming up, suggested by a random friend, who I will just say his first initial is S. He inspired this one. He said, I've always rolled my eyes at the Democrats are coming for your guns thing. Well, buddy, you inspired me to show, yes, they are, and I can prove it. And I'm going to try and do one for the federal level, and then try and get into the specific states, and Washington will be first because that's where I live. But there you go on 1808. Chances are it's not going to pass. Chances are it's not going to pass. It's going to pass the House. It's not going to pass the Senate unless we get a whole lot of rhinos not willing to filibuster. And if they don't filibuster, well, then it could pass, and then Biden would sign it, but it will, chances are, get tossed out by the courts. But do we want to go through years of litigation? Right now, there's already a whole lot of laws that they're looking at and saying, because of the Bruen decision, Clarence Thomas, greatest Supreme Court justice ever, probably the single biggest and best domestic move by George H.W. Bush was his appointment to the SCOTUS, has said you have to use text, history, and tradition, and that standard almost nothing can stand. So that's H.R. 1808. It's got 100 pages. It's an easy read if you can just scroll past the list of banned weapons, unless you want to see if something you specifically want or have is banned. And of course, there's a whole lot of unenforceable stuff, like how do you enforce magazine ban when there's no way to tell how many magazines somebody had beforehand. So, and they, other than saying, oh, new ones have to have a serial number, which is idiotic. And as we all know, any gun ban, if is not going to stop a crazy person, because I could do a video here and show online how fast I could order up everything I need to build that ghost gun. Your laws be damned. So it's not that hard just to circumvent them if you're crazy, between 3D printing and being able to machine it yourself. So you're not going to stop a crazy person, and most of your NFA items, you may as well just make it easy to be law-abiding. Because if you do that, the people willing to spend that kind of money, they're going to stay legal. They'll have their weapon, and there will be less impetus for people to just say, oh, put it out there themselves. But they don't do that. So, but that is from my grandfather's desk. And you all take care.